started at Krusty's in 2005, and I'd come from a job in a plumbing supply store, actually, where I was the stock controller. So I was in charge of making sure we had enough pipes, hot water service. It was such a boring job, but it was my out of school job. And um, I applied for a job at the Crusty Demons head office as the stock controller for the freshly launched Crusty clothing brand. I honestly, I didn't know anything about Crusty Demons. I was a beach kid. Um, I surfing and the ball sports were what I kind of loved and had a passion for. So I started work just part time as the inventory controller, and I'll dig up the business card. I still kept it. It was the first business card I ever had, inventory controller, or maybe it was merchandise assistant. And then so I worked there for a few months, and the guy who ran the Crusty clothing brand was like, "Do you want to come up to Brisbane and do the Crusty Night of World Records show?" And I was like, yeah, and I'd heard stories about what was going on the New Zealand tour, and security guards being chased by riders with machetes, and I was like, holy shit, what am I walking into? I'm 23 years old at that time, and I rock up to Willowbank Raceway on the outskirts of Brisbane, and the first thing I see is the at the time the biggest dirt lander that had ever been built for the world record attempts, and then within about an hour, I saw Luke Smith compound fracture his arm, the great Luke Smith. Shout out to Smitty, the Pommy Kiwi, depending on what tour he was on. Then I saw Jim. I saw Jimmy Blaze backflip a snowmobile, and the sound of it was just so loud. At that point in my life, I'd never even seen snow, let alone a snowmobile. And then I got to watch a couple of the distant jumps. It was this, kind of up and coming kid by the name of, same age as me, Robbie Madison was his name. You might know who he is these days. And he was, he was doing, I can't remember what it was. I think it was maybe a seat grab over like 220 feet or something like that. And then Seth Enslow was meant to do the world record attempt, but broke his leg, I think, on the Metal Militia tour, which we'll get to, the breakaway tour. So it was Trigger Gum, rest in peace, and Larry Linkogel going for this record attempt, which Trigger ended up winning, I think, with like 277 feet. And I was running as merch assistant, and it was 25,000 people. I still think to this day it's the biggest action sports crowd ever in Australia. Think about that; it's mad. 21 years ago, we had a concert afterwards, headlined by the Used. I'd never heard of the Used. There was 10,000 people who weren't there for the dirt bikes. They were there for the Used. They stormed the stage, and I'm running through the crowd with boxes of merch, trying to stock up our 4 merch tents. And I got knocked over once, I remember, and someone stole a box of Crusty hats, and I was like, so that was my first experience. It was a 20-hour day, and I honestly, I don't think I'd ever worked a hard day in my life until that day. And I was really happy that it was over, because I got called into the boss's office and was like, oh, we thought you did a good job. Do you want to come on the rest of the tour and just kind of be a general dog's body? That's what I was. I was just a dog's body. I was like, yeah, no problems. I can do that. So I'm 23. I'd only at that point, like I'd never been to Victoria, South Australia, and I'd been to Queensland a couple of times with my family. I'd been overseas on family trips, but I was so insular. Like I didn't do a lot of travel. I didn't know much about anything. I really didn't. I think Adelaide was the first indoor show I did, and they're like, "Oh, you're gonna sit in the 4X, we're the presenting rights sponsor. You're gonna sit in the 4X bar and manage." The winners and the celebrities that are going to sit in the 4X bar. And all of a sudden I found myself sitting with like a couple of AFL players. Fitzy from Nova was there because he just won Big Brother or got to the finals. And then the next week I was hanging out with Brad Fittler and I think Matt Rogers, like NRL guys. Like I was just sitting with them in a makeshift bar on the show set. And then the week after I was with Kelly Slater, I was like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, this is just the best thing ever.